Good evening and welcome to Mid-Valley Bible Church's virtual prayer meeting. My name is Doug Hornock and I have the blessing and privilege of pastoring this wonderful church. Tonight we've arrived at somewhat of a milestone in that this evening is our 50th virtual prayer meeting. We begin these prayer times back in March with the concerns over COVID-19, and tonight we also come to our 19th and final devotional on what is commonly called the Lord's Prayer, or more accurately, the Disciples' Prayer. And tonight we want to look at the end of that prayer that concludes with the words, "For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen." Now, for the sake of accuracy and full disclosure, some Bible translations do not include this portion of the prayer found in Matthew 6 and Luke 11, and others do. And for some, that can be a bit unsettling. Chances are fairly good that only a handful of you were aware of that problem. And I don't want to get too deeply involved in the weeds, but most of the earliest and reliable manuscripts of the New Testament do not have that phrase, "For yours is the kingdom." In other words, the ones that are considered the most historically accurate omit that phrase. And textual scholars of the New Testament have debated and gone round and round on this particular issue, and they have concluded that this phrase was added by overzealous, well-intentioned scribes in the 2nd and 3rd century who felt like something needed to be added after the petition where Jesus tells us to pray that we would not be led into temptation. They felt that the prayer ended much too abruptly. And so they added that line. And what was added and written down was not part of the original statement by Jesus. Now again, that not ought to concern us that much for three primary reasons. First, while this doxology may not have been given directly by Jesus, it can claim broad biblical support. For example, after King David assembled the building material for the future temple, he lifted his heart in praise to God and said in 1 Chronicles 29, "Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power and the glory, the victory and the majesty. Yours is the kingdom." Later echoes of this doxology are found at the end of time in the chant of the four living creatures found in Revelation 5, where they cry out, "Blessing and honor and glory and power be to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever." So there's biblical support for this statement. But second, this trumpet blast of praise expresses truths that are thoroughly scriptural. These are not some off-the-wall concepts that are out of the mainstream of Christianity. And finally, this prayer demands a fitting conclusion, and this doxology gives it that. Otherwise, this prayer would stop with the threat of temptation and a warning that the evil one has set his snares and sights on us. And so when Christians in the 1st and 2nd century met and offered up this prayer to the Father, rather than ending on that cold and frightening note, they added this positive affirmation of praise. And this statement forms a beautiful doxology to end this prayer. And it says, "For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever." But is that true? Does the kingdom belong to God? Well, I suppose that depends on who you ask. Certainly not according to the newspapers or TV pundits. In their minds and way of thinking, kingdoms are centered in the capitals of Washington, D.C., Moscow, and Beijing, and certainly not in heaven or with God. And yet repeatedly throughout the Bible, God says that he is establishing and building his reign and his kingdom. And we need to remember that his kingdom will not come about by human manipulation. It doesn't come about by ecumenical movements or any man-made programs. God's kingdom is established by his return in a catastrophic and cataclysmic coming to the earth, where he puts down all unrighteousness and establishes his kingdom in power and glory. And that's what you express when you say, yours is the kingdom. And is it really his power? Is God really in control, calling the shots? Well, not according to Rabbi Harold Kushner, who argues in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, that while God is all loving, some evil events lie beyond his control. And yet I would argue that even the casual observer can look back over history and see that God has truly been calling the shots. And finally, is his the glory? Well, again, not according to the builders and shapers of technology or science, who sing glory to men on earth as they see whole buildings go up, or they build their fastest computers or advance the latest medicine. And yet, this doxology is a declaration that God is in control, he's calling the shots, and he's working all things out for his purposes and ends. And our chief end as Christians is to glorify God. And that is what we are going to spend eternity doing. And that's why we end this prayer this way. Because when we ask God to provide our daily bread, he does it. And when we ask God for his pardon, he grants it and provides us with the power to forgive others. And finally, he protects us as he leads us away from Satan's traps. That's why we end this prayer by saying, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. And so with that truth before us, let's now go to prayer.